320. The reason for the 220 first, instead of something real harsh, is we don't want to get a bunch of scratches in the harder paint finish. Because it'll be harder to sand out, and then you end up digging your filler out. So if you're just doing a touch-up spot, like pretty much is what we're doing here, bit of primer, that's done. You can see through it, it's almost transparent. You can see here on the front edge of the door, there was some chipping. Might have to go a little coarser, but we'll see. If I slightly tip it this way, it'll contact the door, so they're both going to end up being sanded sort of together. And again, it might not be perfect, but it'll be pretty good. I'm putting pressure here and not on the back. I'm just sort of letting the back float. But you don't want to curl it in either, which is how it seemed like someone else had done it here. So we'll see what happens. Could be a reason last time it was done that way, but often most things work out, so we'll see. We're almost through here, so we'll have to start going right across. We'll get a little more up here. So on a high-end restoration, if this was just your epoxy primer on the car, you'd probably fill most of this out and you'd literally block across the two together. We're not doing that with this car, but that's the way you'd achieve that. And the cool thing, when you sand across two panels and make it all the same plane, it makes a car look even better than it is. So sometimes I feel like the restoration jobs that take more time, sometimes it's almost easier, because what we're doing in the case of this car, we're just cleaning it up and making it kind of respectable. And the thing about that is, it's not going to be as perfect as I'd like, but I have to do it in a way that I'm careful that it'll be decent, but at the same time you don't want to overdo it. And I'm watching my sanding lines the same way you'd watch the ripples in the paint as you're painting, right? You're not looking, when you paint, you don't look at the surface and see color. Forget the color. you want to paint here with your fan, right? Like say like so, but be looking from this direction and watching, you know, the little dots hit the panel so that you can see how bumpy it is, how thin or big the droplets are, and that gives you an idea of how to set your gun so you can make sure you're atomizing the paint as much as your gun will allow. And you can also see how it's going on, if it's going on bumpy or if you're putting enough on that it'll fill in for a somewhat flat paint job. Now some guys talk more about a distance fan and just do this, find your speed, but you really got to be looking at not the color, not the coverage, but what the paint landing on the car is doing. And if you get fairly decent at that, especially on, got a little dirt on my hand there from somewhere, but if you can get good at that, the idea is with a little luck, especially on a cheaper job such as this car, if you get it good enough, you don't have to buff it for a week. You're going to paint it and send it out the door, which is how it used to be, where now everybody seems to be throwing the paint on and they're spending a bunch of time cutting and buffing. And I'm not against that, especially if you're an amateur. Just get the paint on the car. Do a half decent job, right? And then you can always refine it and buff it in. But I mean, I could spend an extra week making this car even better. An extra 2-3 weeks. I could put another month into the car. But then I got to charge a lot more money. So time is money and so on and so forth. And the idea is do the best you can in a certain budget depending on the car. So if you're doing a 69 396 SS Chevelle that's worth a lot of money, you certainly want to do more, but assume that the guy has the budget to do more. And some people have a moderate budget, and like this car is not a perfect car anyways. Although it may have been rare because it had the overhead cam 6-cylinder originally. Now we're going to switch to the 320. I'm not going over the edge, I'm just letting it kind of float. And again, I'm more or less concentrating on getting the sand scratches that I just put into this white finish out. Now the paint we're using, single stage, and it's going to be white, so it'll cover and bury things really well anyway, but you still, like I said in one of my other videos recently, treat it as though it may one day end up black, even if we're not making it black. Because black, you know, when you got a Ripley car shows off, and that being said, I've seen a lot of black cars at car shows, and, you know, it could have been someone did it at home in the garage, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there was a time where even black paint jobs were done over body work, that white and yellow paint jobs were done. A lot of people like silver. They think it's light and it'll hide stuff. To some degree it does. Well, not for this guy. I don't like silver. I've never liked silver. If I had to say there's a color that I hate painting, it's probably always going to come up silver. Beige and white I found used to be hard, because if you don't know how to look at the paint as I described earlier, and you're looking at the coverage and the fan and all this other stuff, I find with white, if you look at coverage too much. Now, if everything is white and we do our sealer, it'll be okay. But if it's not, and it was just like we're going to paint right over this the way it is, prime that obviously, but you know, Most people doing it at home will have spots like this all over the car. So you want to get enough coats on for coverage. The hard thing about white, maybe even a light yellow or beige or like a Cadillac cream white, is at some point you're gonna get runs, because paint's more like jello than mud, as in you can see through it. Like there's reflection, but there's also refraction. Refraction is not the light bouncing off it, but going in it and bouncing out. And sometimes when you do white, that's the case. So you end up putting too much on, thinking, there it is, there's my coverage, just like when I paint green. But then what happens is you come back and there's like right below the line, you'll get a sag or a run. And I mean, you might get that anyway. Nice thing with a lot of these urethanes, I've never really had an issue where I couldn't buff something like that out. And if you gotta sand and buff a few spots, that's one thing, but you don't want to be buffing the whole vehicle. Now, you can if you have lots of time. When money's involved, like for me, there's no way I'm gonna make a profit if I gotta buff this whole car, because I don't have that kind of a budget on this car. Should there be? Well, absolutely, there should be. In a perfect world, there should always be a big budget. Now notice that bright spot on the car here. I'm just gonna go on a side note. My man door has this window in it, which is great. You can see when people come up to the door. You can't see to do body work in that light. You'd have to have the car right outside for that to work for you. So see how it's almost blinding? And I mean, it don't matter that the car's white, it'll do that. But if you look across the back wall of my shop, not a window in the place, no windows in the garage doors. I was thinking of putting a couple portholes in each one, but then you got to block them because you don't want the light coming in. In my old shop, I mean, this one's not too bad. We got that little bit of light coming in through the door, and in about an hour it'll go away. But in my other shop, the light was in this direction through a man door, and it would come in and ruin your whole 3-4 hours of your afternoon. And the background light is so blinding that you don't see well. But anyway, that's just a side note. In case you wonder why some of the body shops and stuff you see never seem to have windows. And a lot of guys go, put more windows. Keep in mind, even doing mechanical, you're looking in there, you're looking in the hood. You got to have big lights shining in that outpower that light, because the brightness around you makes you not see what's right in front of you. Anyways. So we got this spot to do, which I'm going to do exactly the same way as I just showed you. A little bit there, a little bit there. We're just about done. Let's come up to the hood. So the hood was a complete mess. The hood is no longer a mess. It's actually going to be really nice. I'm really pleased with the hood. Turned out good. I think it's going to be smooth. Now, the one thing you got to look at, I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to put my finger there for focus. There it is. So there's some heavy sand scratching back here. So either I got to prime that and sand it, a little bit of fill and sand it, or maybe just sand it. So I'm going to hit it with a couple shots of primer real quick. And the whole hood was almost ready, but we had to fix some spots. We sanded them in. But make sure you go over your work and check that. And the funny thing with that, I had the big man door, or this door open. You couldn't see that at all. Make sure you walk around your hood, use a light, whatever you got to. You know, use a light in the background. You'll see I've got a big shop light set up here with twin 250 bulbs. Basically, I come down like this, and all of a sudden, now, I know it won't show on camera. Here. No, it doesn't. But when I look right here, I can see those sand scratches. So you got to get down every single angle that you can. Now, I've done that, and I think it's mostly pretty good. But I did see that spot back there. Now, another thing that people talk about online, everybody says you got to wear all these gloves, oil in your hands and all this. It depends on where you live, who you are. It depends on the person. It is beneficial to be able to feel. Now, Your hen will trick you as far as things being flat and straight once they're shiny. So you can't do this to say, I believe it's flat. But what it does let you feel, any coarseness, any overspray on a panel, you know, that sort of thing. If it wasn't sanded well in a certain spot, you might kind of run over and be like, oh, there's a rough patch. Now, no matter what I do, I always feel like there's a low spot right here. But then if I move my body over here and do it, it goes away. A little bit of roughness right here, but you can see sand scratching. Look, if you do this a lot, or even just once in a while, after the first little bit, my hands with the dust, it absorbs out the moisture from your skin. Your hands are dry, they pretty much leave nothing. But look at it this way. You're going to be washing all this later with your wax and grease remover, and that'll take care of anything your hands left behind. Now, some people do have extremely sweaty or oily hands. That's a whole other thing. But I used to do it too, wear gloves all the time for every little thing. And then a few guys have mentioned it, and they're not wrong. When I feel around, it has helped me find some stuff. There's a little bit there. So this was all finished out in 320. I just went ahead. I had to fill. There was a line here, like a low spot over here somewhere. What else did we have? And in this area here, we kind of fixed that up because there was some sand scratching that our high build primer didn't take out. So I put that in, blocked it in smooth, kind of like what you saw me just do on the car. And I threw a little bit of primer on just to see it. And while the primer was wet, you know, you can kind of come down, open the door, catch the light, see how smooth it is. But it's got to be wet to do that. Now, another thing you can do with this, and this is what I'm going to do next, I got to wash this with the wax and grease remover. I'm going to put it on heavy so that it's wet. And I probably won't be able to get the whole hood in one shot, but I might do the biggest section of the hood and scoop here, stand over there and look at it in the light, because when that's wet, it's going to show you exactly what the paint looks like when it's wet on the same surface. So any little dips, dives, pock marks, whatever you want to call them, once it's wet, it's going to show it off, and that's what we want. I mean, I can guess and say that this is smooth and perfect all day long, but it's probably not. My goodness, this hood was so rough. I'm very happy to see it the way it is. It's definitely going to work for us, and it's going to look good. There's filler in it. It ain't enough filler to hurt anybody or do anything. I'm pretty confident it'll last as long as the car does, so I'm not too worried about it. So, that's just a quick one for today. Cheers.